I have analyzed the top 100 altcoins and I tried to figure out what connection is there really between price performance and tokenomics, as in how much does the supply of a token grow over time and how much of an impact does this have on the performance. Should we be concerned when the team cashes out tokens over time when there are vesting unlocks? The trading idea is straightforward because most altcoins tend to underperform Bitcoin most of the time. Instead of trying to find the few outliers and try to pick a needle in the haystack, why don't we do the opposite? Why don't we just flip this chart and everything that's red over here turns green by betting on falling prices, and everything that's green, which is not much, then turns red. This seems to be the logical conclusion. And there are plenty of examples where an increase in the token supply was very bad for the price development. This here is WLD, WorldCoin. The circulating supply constantly grows, and thus the price relative to Bitcoin tended to go down. And then the trading idea is to just do the exact opposite. We bet on a rising price of Bitcoin and on a falling price of WLD at the same time and make money from that underperformance. And so for this video, I crunched the numbers using AI. So I looked back, as in how much did the token supply grow, say over the last year, and how did the token perform relative to Bitcoin? How was this over the last year, over the last 2 years, over the last 5 years? How strong of a connection is there really between outperformance or underperformance and the supply growth? Because situations like the one for WorldCoin, that's still cherry picking. We cannot say for certain that all of the tokens that are listed on this website, like here, tokenomics.ai, that all of those tokens will always underperform just because their supply grows over time. So here we go. On the y-axis, we've got the annual outperformance versus Bitcoin on a logarithmic scale. On the x-axis, we've got the annual token inflation, also on a logarithmic scale. I analyzed the top 100 tokens in terms of market cap. Still, the sample size is only 80 because in this 1 year look back window, 20 of the top 100 tokens have not been there in that list 1 year ago. So we've got less than 1 year of history, then that token is excluded from this view. The orange line, that's the regression chart. We can see some altcoins outperformed Bitcoin. The majority of altcoins underperformed Bitcoin in the last year. When the supply shrunk, we tended to see outperformance versus Bitcoin. When the supply expanded, we tend to see underperformance. Here is WLD. We also see how the vast majority of altcoins was inflationary in the last year. So we had supply growth. And this quadrant over here is the one we don't want to be in, right? We don't want to have an underperformer that also has supply growth. Now we also have some statistics over here, how strong the connection actually is. And I was surprised. It's not as strong as I would have thought. The R squared is 0.08%. So that means that only 8% of a token's outperformance or underperformance can be explained with token dilution. The slope is minus 0.96%. So this is interesting. It means that 1% of supply expansion reduces the expected return also by roughly 1% per annum. So it's almost a 1-to-1 ratio. If a token expands its supply by 20% per annum, we should expect its return to go down by roughly 20% per annum, just as an example. We also see how the regression line cuts below zero when there is no supply growth. In other words, even if we don't have any supply growth at all, an altcoin is expected on average to do worse compared to Bitcoin. At least that was true in the last year. So already very interesting findings, even if we just look at 1 year of data, and we're going to look at more data points in a second. Even if we just look at 1 year, we can still see a connection. For roughly each percentage point of supply expansion, we have to expect 1 percentage point of less return. We also see that even if an altcoin does not expand in its supply, that it tends to underperform Bitcoin on average. We also see that most altcoins are inflationary. So on an already negative base, we then add on top of that more negative performance with the token inflation. That's what we can get from this chart alone. Now let's have a look at 2 years. The slope is slightly less steep. So for every percent supply expansion, we now only have 0.8% underperformance versus BTC. The R squared though increased. So it went from 0.08 to 0.13. In other words, those data points now fit the regression line better. Over the 2-year time period, the tokenomics become a better predictor of performance compared to just 1 year, which is completely intuitive, right? The longer we hold a token, the more the long-term supply dynamics should have an impact. Again, most altcoins are inflationary, very few are deflationary. And even if there is deflation, it doesn't mean that the token outperforms BTC. And while this example here with WorldCoin was definitely cherry-picked, it is in line with the model's prediction, as in we do have strong token inflation, thus we should expect strong underperformance. WorldCoin actually still performed relatively well given how much it inflated. Other tokens like Celestia, TIA are also highly inflationary, but they got punished above the expectation. This gives us a good overview of what altcoins to potentially short as well, right? Layer 0, Jito, Say, Arbitrum, and it tells us what tokens to rather stay away from. Still, this is a look back. This is not the forward-looking tokenomics. So you might want to make that analysis going forward. I consider publishing that on Premium. What's currently the tokenomics of the top 100 altcoins? And based on that model, what is their predicted underperformance? So instead of looking back, we would look forward and then turn this chart into this chart. That's in general how I make most of my money in altcoin trading, right? This is a track record over the last 2 years. I cannot share the current open positions, but all the closed positions are also in the pinned comment down below. I'm looking for highly inflationary tokens and then I bet on them doing worse compared to Bitcoin, right? For example, here we shorted Trump relative to Bitcoin. Trump, unfortunately, is not highlighted on this chart because we don't have a 2-year look back. On the 1-year look back chart, I also cannot find it, unfortunately. Now let's go from 1 year to 2 years to now 3 years. The R squared increases even more. So now 16% of the price development is explained by tokenomics. The slope has also reduced though. So now each percentage point of additional supply reduces the forward-looking return only by 0.66%. WorldCoin and OKB, the two outliers, are pretty much bang on the line. There are a few outliers in the meme coin space, and there are some tokens that get punished much beyond their expected token inflation, while others get rewarded. And we have to figure out why that is. I don't have an answer for that yet, but finding out what is the difference among those outliers, it could help us refine the model even further. On the 4-year look-back window, the R-square goes to 18%. On the 5-year look-back window, it's the same. There's clearly a connection between tokenomics and performance relative to Bitcoin, but it's not as strong as I would have expected prior to this analysis. An R-square of 18 is still not that high, given that we're looking at 5 years of supply development. Now, don't understand me wrong. It's still a factor to consider, but it's not necessarily the major factor. There is still another 82% of price development that's not explained by tokenomics. So what we want to do going forward, that's my plan for future videos on this channel, is to find potentially a multifactorial model. A model that doesn't just look at relative performance based on tokenomics, but a model that also includes other things. For example, what kind of token inflation do we have? Is this vesting unlocks by the team, or is this airdrops to the masses? How is the supply expanding and how strong are the holders? What kind of launch did we get? Did we get a fair launch, or did we get a launch with a lot of insider ownership from day one? How much of an impact does that have? And of course, we want to figure out how does this look like going forward? What is the supply inflation in the next 1, 2, 3 years for the top 100 altcoins? And what altcoins can we potentially use to make money? That analysis will be reserved for Premium though. So yeah, I still think it makes sense to not try to pick the needle in the haystack, but to rather bet on the general market structure. While tokenomics cannot explain everything, we do see that even the altcoins without any token inflation, which are not many, they have a negative expected annualized return versus Bitcoin. In other words, if we want to outperform Bitcoin, we can either try to find those few outliers on the left side of this chart, or we can bet on those things on the right to continue to do worse. That worked for pretty much any time window. But of course, the shorter the perspective, the more noise we have in the data. Still, the vast majority tends to underperform, and this is irrespective of whether or not we are in a bull market. This is a structural thing. Altcoins do poorly, highly inflating altcoins do even worse. And again, that's an opportunity for us. And this is not just theory. This is how I personally make my money in this market as well. Now, unfortunately, I cannot share all the trades that I currently have open here for free on YouTube. However, there is one trade that I do want to share that's completely free. And I invite you to just copy trade me and make your first money and learn how we actually take advantage of the system. This is in the pinned comment down below. Get your free premium trade. You don't have to pay anything. You don't have to put in a credit card. You can either get that free premium trade via Telegram, you just scan this QR code, or you click this button, or you can get it via email, you just plug in the email over here. Besides the position that I currently have open, that many premium members have open as well, you will also get the tutorial video that explains everything in more detail. Thanks for watching. If you got some value, feel free to give this a like, feel free to also subscribe. I publish videos regularly. See you next time on YouTube or see you on premium. Link to that pops up here on the screen as well. See you next time. Cheers.